أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الحمد لله الذي له ما في السماوات وما في الأرض وله الحمد في الآخرة وهو الحكيم الخبير والصلاة والسلام على المبعوث إلى كافة الورى بشيرا ونذيرا وداعيا إلى الله بإذنه وسراجا منيرا أبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته أئمة الهدى ومصابيح الدجى الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا أما بعد فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الرجال قوامون على النساء بما فضل الله بعضهم على بعض وبما أنفقوا من أموالهم صلوا على محمد وعلى Very respected elders, brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah. As you heard, tonight's lecture is really a continuation of last night's lecture. And just as a quick summary of what we discussed last night, we said that if you were to Google the words wife beating in Islam or the wife beating verse, you would come across many websites that portray a very negative image of women in Islam. They portray women in Islam as being somehow inferior, and the fact that according to these websites in Islam men are allowed to beat their wives. And in these websites you will often find pictures of women with completely battered faces, and then they also quote hadith which they claim are authentic from the Holy Prophet, and also they quote scholars who say that not only is it permissible in Islam to beat wives, but it is even encouraged and recommended. And they give examples sometimes of when the Holy Prophet himself, ma'azallah, beat his wives, and they say that this is the picture of Islam that we have. So we said yesterday that in order to look at this, we need to see where are the sources of all of these statements and these ahadith. And when we look at it in more detail, we see that there's none from a Shi'i perspective. Neither the hadith they quote, or the examples they give, or even the statements from the so-called scholars and personalities that they give their statements from. They are all from non-Shi'i sources, they are all non-Shi'i scholars and personalities. And so we said that we need to readdress the balance and put forward the madhab of the Ahlul Bayt's perspective on this verse. Because this is something not just actually on websites, we also find articles and books written on this. And again, very rarely do we hear anything, very rarely do we see or read anything from a Shi'i perspective. So we said that inshallah this is something we will readdress in these lectures, and it is very important that we do so because these so-called controversial verses are there in our holy book. We cannot deny their existence. If we were to open the Quran right now, we will see these verses, and it's very important for us to be able to have good, effective responses ready for whenever we are challenged, whenever our children are challenged in school, in colleges, and as a defense for our madhab and our Quran, we cannot just simply bury our heads in the sand and think or act as if they don't exist. No, they are there. But they have their answers. They have a correct interpretation and they have a wrong interpretation. We believe that our interpretation is correct, is moderate, and we inshallah can show that in Islam there is no such thing as superiority of men over women, and there is no such thing as allowing the beating of wives according to the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. we do not have even one example of any of the infallibles ever beating their wives. We don't have any examples in the seerah of the Prophet or the Imams alayhimus salam. So having discussed this as an introduction, we then went on to look at the verse itself, which is verse number 34 of Surah An-Nisa, chapter number 4. And we looked at the wording of this verse, starting with qawwamun. What does it mean when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ar-rijalu qawwamuna ala nisa? And we said there are many translations of this word, but for the purposes of this discussion, we will use the word maintainers. That men are the maintainers of women. But then we said that actually, according to some scholars, such as Ayatollah Jawadi Amani, it is not men over women. Rather, it is husbands over wives. And even then, some of them, because Allah uses the word ba'd, some of them are maintainers over others. And then you'll recall we said that there are two main reasons mentioned by Allah when He uses the ba. The ba is for ta'liliya, meaning it gives a reason. As long as the reason holds true, then the statement holds true. So the two reasons Allah gives in the verse for men, for husbands to be maintainers of their wives is, first of all, if they have greater income, and secondly, if they do actually spend for their women and for their families in what they have from their wealth. After this, we said that actually the word qawwamun is in the intensive form, not in the normal form, which would be qa'im. Qawwam means that there is a great responsibility on the shoulders of husbands to do this. This is what Allah is trying to get across, because He uses this word in other verses that we saw for very important and very sensitive things. So when He says men are the qawwam of women, it means that they have this great responsibility to maintain them from their wealth. Then we said that actually from the verses of the Quran, we get this very important conclusion, that there's only one criterion to determine whether somebody is superior to another person or not. That criterion is taqwa. In Surah Al-Hujurat, verse 13, Allah tells us, Inna akramakum indallah atqakum. The most noble among you in the eyes of Allah are the ones of you, those of you who have the more taqwa and God-wariness. Otherwise, there is no such thing as the male being more superior than the female. Then after this, we saw that in fact, a lot depends on the wording of the Quran. And we then went on to explain this whole principle of equal but different. From our perspective, all men and women, they are equal, but they are different. They are equal because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created all human beings in terms of two dimensions. One is their spiritual dimension, the other is their physical, biological, material dimension. According to the spiritual dimension, the ruh, well, the ruh is neither male nor female. And therefore, neither male nor female is superior to the other when it comes to the spiritual dimension. Both have equal opportunity and potential to get close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and rise closer and closer towards Him. Whereas the differences lie when we look at their existence on this plane, the plane of the dunya, the material realm, because no one can deny that a woman's body is different to a man's body. And therefore, because of these differences, obviously and naturally, they must have differences in their rights and in their duties. These duties and rights, we explained, there are two wajib duties for a husband to perform, two wajib duties for a wife to perform, and then there's one shared wajib duty for both of them. And then after this, we looked at the whole issue of hitting and the extent of that hitting. Can it, first of all, what do we mean by the 3 steps which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes in this verse, when He says that if a woman is nashiza, and we explained what that meant, A nashiza woman is a woman who does not perform her obligatory marital duties towards her husband. Those two things she doesn't do. And therefore, the husband has the right to do three things, step by step. First of all, he has the right to... First of all, he has the right to advise her, verbal communication. Secondly, then he shuns her in the bed. And then thirdly, if that is ineffective, as a last resort, the verse says, hit her. But now we explain what hitting means. Darb has many meanings. One of the meanings that we can ascribe to it in this verse is simply a light tap. It is a symbolic type of hitting rather than a physical hurting. It's not that at all. So there's no such thing in actual fact as wife beating in Islam. From our perspective, what there is wife admonition in a very light, soft way, simply to that level, because we looked at verses in the Quran to prove our point. We saw the story of Nabi Ayyub in Surah Al-Sad, verse number 44, where Allah tells him to beat his wife or to lightly admonish his wife with those plants or bunch of twigs. And we said that this was because on the one hand he had made a qasam and an oath to do this if he gets better, but on the other hand she was very loyal, she was very pious, she was very God conscious, and so he didn't want to punish her, but because of this qasam he had to fulfill the oath. So Allah finds this way round, that don't break your oath, but take these plant-like things or these twigs and just punish her with that. So then, if the story of Nabi Ayyub talks about a symbolic type of hitting, a sort of like a communicative type of admonition, meaning it's simply communicating to the wife that I have to do something, and this is a sign that I dislike your nushuz, I dislike your actions, not that I am going to physically hurt you. Then of course we cannot read the Quran in an inconsistent manner. If it means beating, if it means a light tap in that story, it must also mean the same thing in verse 434, which means a light tap, a symbolic type of expressing our dislike that, oh my wife, you because of your recalcitrance, as we translated Nashi's meaning, because you are recalcitrant, you are disobeying Allah's laws. Allah has said that you must do this and you must do that with regards to your husband, and we are now, because you are disobeying Allah's laws, we have the right to, first of all, to advise you, secondly, shun you in the bed, and then thirdly, as a last resort, I am expressing, this is the meaning behind it, I am expressing my dislike for your actions by placing my hand on you, by just giving you a light tap. This is a way of me communicating to you that as a last resort, after this comes separation. After this comes divorce. So in order not to get to that level, I am telling you this is the last resort. Then we saw as a last point of this summary that we also have great guidance from the Aima alayhimus salam. So Imam Jafar al-Sadiq salawatullah wa salamu alayhi tells us the extent to this light tap. It must not cause any wounding, and it must be like something with a miswak or siwak, a toothstick. And then we have in our fiqh rulings, it must not even cause redness. Never mind bruising and wounding and bleeding. That's way beyond the extent that we're allowed. Not even redness. If a husband was to cause redness to his wife, then he would have to pay diya and compensation. So this was a summary of where we left it last night. Inshallah, tonight we will continue the discussion, looking at some other points, and then we will say a few things about Jumatul Wida and also Yawmul Qul. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So now, with regards to this whole issue of men and women being equal but different, as it's known as, the equal but different position, I would like to put forward this example. Now, let's just think about a $1 bill. Okay, we have a $1 bill, and then we have 4 quarters. Because I mean, America right now, I have to give this example, otherwise if it was London I would say a pound and say for example 10 pence coins, right? So when we look at these two things, we have a $1 bill and 4 quarters, are they the same?
Yes.
Are they? $1 bill is like a note, paper, but then we have 4 quarters, they are coins. Are they the same? Some people are saying yes, some people are saying no. Many people are confused. This is exactly what we mean by equal but different. Why? Because they are equal in value, aren't they? They both come to 100, right? 100 cents. You know, in effect, they are equal in value, but they are different in form. They are different in shape and in their physical appearance. This is exactly the same with regards to the position of the male and the female. Equal but different. According to our teachings of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, men and women, in the eyes of Allah, they are equal. They have equal opportunity to rise to Him. They're equal spiritually. None is superior over the other. But they are different in the sense that when we look at their physical form, in this dunya, there are biological differences. There are differences in their physical construction and makeup. This doesn't mean one is worth more. If you were to give me 4 quarters, it'd be worth the same as $1 bill. And this is what we mean by the equal but different position. According to this, therefore, they have differences in duties and differences in rights, which we discussed yesterday. Those 2 wajib duties a man has, the 2 wajib duties a woman has, and the shared duty as well. This is what we mean by the equal but different position. In Islam, we do not believe in identical rights. In fact, if we were to say men and women must have identical rights and duties, this would be going against their physical differences. This would be going against their biological differences. How can a man who cannot bear children have exactly the same duties and rights as a woman? How can a woman who is, according to everyone really, if they are really true to themselves, a woman who is physically weaker, not mentally or spiritually or anything else, but physically, she's slightly weaker than the male, generally speaking, how can she have exactly the same duties and rights as the male? So, this is what we mean. Otherwise, like I said yesterday, if they were exactly the same, then why don't they always compete on the sports field together? Why do they always divide men's sports from women's sports? It shows us that there are these physical differences. Islam recognizes this. Islam's laws are consistent with the natural order that has been created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If we were to go against this, we would be going against the natural created order of the entire cosmos as created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Another important point is to bear in mind when we talk about this verse and hitting, and we say it's only a light tap. Well, yesterday we saw from other verses of the Quran why we say this. From, for example, the story of Nabi Ayyub. But when we look at the Quran, just like we look at anyone's speech, anyone's book, anyone's article, we have to read it as a whole. If we want to get a proper picture and a proper understanding of that speech, article, book, whatever it might be, we have to look at it as a whole, isn't it? We can't just look at things in a piecemeal way and take it out of context and say this is what he meant, this is what it says. What about the other parts of the book that explain the other parts? We discussed this in one of the majalis, how the Quran's verses explain other verses. So, let's look at this. We say it is only a light tap, Because first of all, the Quran is a divine revelation from Allah. Because it's a divine revelation, it means there must be an internal consistency in its meaning. If one part of the Quran meant something, for example, the word darb meant beating, like in 434, and in another part, when Allah talks about marriage and the relationship between husband and wife, and He uses the word darb, if it meant something else, you would say, what sort of book is this? This cannot be a divine revelation. It's inconsistent. It's conflicting. So, let's look at how Allah talks about marriage and whether it is consistent with the light tap, or does darb really mean beating? Well, look at the verses that talk about marriage and the relationship between a man and a woman. They talk about things like love, compassion, tranquility, comfort, affection. So, if darb in that verse meant beat them, beat your wives, it would be diametrically opposite to these other meanings of the word darb and other concepts that there are of marriage and the relationship between husband and wife. It would be diametrically opposite. It would be inconsistent. Because this cannot be the case, we have to look at it as a holistic book of revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If Islam advocated domestic violence, then how can Allah then in other verses talk about love and peace and tranquility and harmony? So now let's look at those other verses. Surah Al-Rum, verse number 21. How does Allah describe marriage and the relationship between a husband and wife? He says, وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ أَنْ خَلَقَ لَكُمْ مِنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ أَزْوَاجًا. One of His signs, He says, is that He has created for you from yourselves spouses. And then He says, not only that, وَجَعَلَ بَيْنَكُمْ مُوَدَّةً وَرَحْمَةً. He has placed between you, between husband and wife, what? Affection and mercy. So how can that tie in with beating your wives? It doesn't make sense. Another verse in Surah At-Tawbah, verse number 71. Allah talks about the believing men and the believing women being good friends of each other. وَالْمُؤْمِنُونَ وَالْمُؤْمِنَاتِ بَعْدُهُمْ أَوْلِيَاءُ بَعْدٍ. How do we explain that then? If that means beat your wives, soon as she becomes a bit nashiza, you just beat the hell out of her. It doesn't make sense. The verse says that the believing men and the believing women are awliya of one another. They are good friends. They are comrades of one another. Another verse, Surah An-Nisa, verse 19. وَآشِرُوهُنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. Allah says, and live with them. Who are them? Here He's talking about the wives. Live with wives bil ma'ruf, with kindness. So now, how does it fit in? Therefore, we must interpret that verse in the light of the sayings of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, who say it is only a light tap. We must interpret that verse in light of other verses that talk about there being just this symbolic admonition, not physically hurting. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So now let's look at some examples of great marriages and how they were. Could they ever have been so successful if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had commanded the husband to beat the wife? I'll just give you a few examples. There are so many. Allama Tabatabai, the great author of Al-Mizan. Now, it is reported that actually when he was writing this seminal work, Al-Mizan, he had this habit of wanting to drink tea all the time. Okay, this was his habit. Now, just imagine if every time he had to get up and fill his ustukhan, as they would call it, right? The small cup of tea with chai. Every time, half an hour, 1 hour, whatever it might be. How would he have written this great work? He would be distracted all the time. Look at what his wife used to do. She used to just make sure that she would keep an eye on his cup. Every time it went down to the level where now really he cannot drink that amount left in the cup, she would very secretively, in a very sort of like inconspicuous way, come and fill that cup. He would drink it. Another 20 minutes pass, half an hour. She knows that he requires tea. Again, very gently, without even him knowing, fill that cup again and again. All day long, she would do this. Now, this is an example of marriage in Islam. This is an example of how a husband and wife need to be. Not in that way that some people, like I said, those websites, those articles, those books that talk about the conflict between men and women in Islam, in their marriages. In fact, I would even say this: if it wasn't for that act of his wife, how would Al-Mizan have been written? How could it have been finished? Or at least in that great qualitative way that we have in front of us today. Definitely the wife of Allama Muhammad Hussain Tabatabai is sharik and partner in the thawab of what Allama Tabatabai has written. Definitely, she is a partner of the reward of this. Another example, Imam Khomeini. It is reported that from his granddaughter, she says, from the age of 15, he would recite Salatul Layl, the night prayer. But now look how he used to do it. Look at the respect he had for his wife. The first example was the wife with regards to the husband. How about husband to wife, husband to children? Look what he used to do. She says that every night, in order to not wake us up when he would rise for Salatul Layl, instead of switching on all the lights, like some people do, right? What he would do is take a small lamp, and that would show him the way in the dark. Then he would go to a room in the corner of the house and perform his Salatul Layl there quietly. Just because one of us wants to do some extra ibadah, it doesn't mean the whole family wants to do it. We have to respect their time and their rest and their sleep as well. His wife now narrates something else. She says that actually when my husband, referring to Imam Khomeini, would want to get up for Salatul Layl, you know what he used to do? Out of respect for his family, when he wanted to perform wudu, he would not even open the tap in a normal way and let the water drip down and pour down onto the sink, because that would make too much noise. That would wake up the family members. So what he would do is take a sponge and he would place it under the tap. Then when he would do wudu, any extra water would fall into the sponge and it would not hit the sink and make noise. This is the respect of a husband and wife. This is what we regard as being successful marriages in Islam. Not that type of image that they portray as some type of negative, some type of patriarchal, male-dominant type of marriages. And of course, the best example of all, when we look at the holy lives of Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib sallallahu alayhi, and that of the holy lady Fatima to Zahra sallallahu alayha, we see how they were. And then really it's mind-boggling how anyone would say that the marriages in Islam is like that, what we are portraying in those websites. So shortly after they got married, Rasulul Akram sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he asked them how their spouses. So first of all, he asked Mawla Amir that, how did you find your wife? Look what he says. He says, Ni'mal aun ala ta'atillah. An excellent helper in the obedience of Allah. This is marriage, a true marriage in Islam. That the Holy Lady Fatima was the greatest helper for Imam Ali in getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in being obedient to him. And then he asks his daughter that, how did you find your husband? And look what she says. She says, Khairu Ba'al. the best husband. So this is marriage in Islam. This is marriage according to our teachings, not what some people would have us believe. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So now, with regards to this verse, so why was it revealed? What's the philosophy behind it? Well, when we look at some of the sources that there are in Islam, meaning non-Shi'i sources, we come across what is known as the Sha'an Nuzul, mentioned quite widely. The Sha'an Nuzul or Sabab al-Nuzul is the reason for revelation. So, for example, in Suyuti's Ad-Durr al-Mansur, this Suyuti, Jalaluddin Suyuti, is a very famous, very prominent Sunni scholar of the Quran and Hadith. In his tafsir work, he puts forward the reason for revelation of this verse, 434, and the so-called wife-beating verse. He says it's like this, that one day a man had slapped his wife. Now, this wife had gone to Rasul al-Akram sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And she had told him what happened. Nabi al-Akram replies that there must be qisas here, meaning the husband must be punished. Just like he hit you, he must also be hit. He must also be punished physically. But then according to this tradition, at that time, verse 434 is revealed, meaning that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is somehow correcting the Prophet. Now, is this correct? So basically, the Prophet said, qisas, he must be punished. But then 434 is revealed, meaning that no, men are qawamun over women, and then men can do these three things, including hitting their wives, meaning it is fine. So now, Allama Tabatabai, he says that not just this tradition, but there are other traditions mentioned in Ad-Durr al-Mansur by Suyuti from other chains of narrators that say other things as well. They say that when this verse was revealed, the Holy Prophet said that I wanted something and Allah wanted something else. Now, Allama Tabatabai, he puts forward a brilliant argument rejecting these type of traditions. He says we cannot agree with these type of traditions at all, because they are actually pointing to the fact that the Holy Prophet was not ma'soom. We believe in the inerrancy of the Holy Prophet. We believe in the infallibility of the Holy Prophet and all the Imams. From day one, they did not make mistakes. What these traditions are effectively saying is that the Prophet, first of all, he was in the position of giving a hukam. He was in a position of explaining Islamic law, isn't it? The woman had come to him and he said, this is what the Islamic legal position is. And he told her, ma'adallah, the wrong thing. So Allah had to reveal the verse in order to correct the Prophet. And then the Prophet says, I wanted something and Allah wanted something else. He says that this is totally wrong. It goes against our Kalami beliefs and it goes against the verses of the Quran. Look at Surah Al-Najm, verse number 3 and verse number 4. What does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say? That وَمَا يَنْتِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا وَحْيٌ يُوحَىٰ. He does not talk from his own desires. Everything is a revelation revealed to him. So, Allah puts forward this brilliant reason that actually that cannot be the reason for revelation of this verse. So then, what can be the reason for revelation of this verse? Some scholars have put forward this view, that at the time of 7th century Arabia, domestic violence was prevalent. And this verse was revealed to gradually bring in a type of cooling off period for that very dominant, for that very patriarchal male who wants to go to step 3, meaning he wants to beat his wife immediately. This verse was revealed in order to put forward this, what they call a gestation period, a cooling down period. That look, you must go through thoughtful measures before you get to any type of physical admonition. You must think and cool down. How do you do this? First of all, advise your wife, then shun her in your bed. If that is ineffective, then you can physically admonish her, but of course even then at that light tap level. That's one thing. But also today, not just in 7th century Arabia, this is very good argument for males today. When usually a male wants to be violent, he wants to admonish his wife in a physical way, immediately he'll go to step 3 and he'll try to beat her. What this verse is saying is really, it's a remarkable strategy in anger management. It's anger management. It's saying, no, first you must advise her, then you must shun her in the bed, and then the worst come to worst, last resort, that light tap. By this time, the male has cooled down. He has managed his anger, and therefore this we can say is really, perhaps we cannot ever say with 100% certainty, but these are good reasons why such a verse was revealed. In fact, to end with this final tradition before we say a few words about Yawmul Jum'ah and Yawmul this Jumatul Wida and Yawmul Quds, I will end with this tradition. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, doesn't he say, Sabaqat rahmatuhu ghadaba, that Allah's mercy precedes his ghadab, Allah's mercy precedes his wrath and anger? This for us tells us that Allah, first and foremost, he wants to be merciful to everyone, and then comes ghadab, right, after his rahmah. This, my brothers and sisters, is a brilliant lesson for us all, as men, as women, as husbands, as wives. We must always look towards mercy first and foremost. Follow in the way Allah acts with us. First comes mercy, then ghadab and anger and wrath. We too must always try and resolve our marital differences, our other differences between ourselves with mercy, with love, affection and tranquility, just like those verses were telling us and the verses that we looked at. So as a summary, in fact, this verse, the so-called wife-beating verse, can be explained in all of these ways. When we look at the verses of the Quran and the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, it is nothing to do with beating wives. We explained what darb means, hitting means. It's just that light tap. Nashiza, who is Nashiza? She's only obedient to her husband in those 2 wajib ways. This verse is about husband and wives, not all men and all women. There is nothing like superiority of men over women. There's only one criterion, and that is taqwa. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the verses how a marriage should be one of tranquility, mercy, love and compassion. We saw some examples from our great scholars. We saw the best example from Imam Ali and the Holy Lady Fatima, and we have been looking at all of this in a very holistic way, including why the verse was revealed and the philosophy behind it. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Now just a few words about Jumatul Wida and Yawmul Quds. First of all, Jumatul Wida, the farewell Friday. There is this amazing tradition from Rasul al-Akram sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, that when Jabir ibn Abdullah Ansari came to him, it was the last Friday of the holy month of Ramadan. The Holy Prophet, when he saw Jabir, he says to him, "Oh Jabir, today is the last Friday of the month of Ramadan." And he says that, recite this. He says, bid this month of Ramadan farewell. That's why it's called Jumatul Wida, the farewell Friday. Bid it farewell by reciting this, which inshallah we will all recite together. And then he says that whoever recites this will win one of 2 good things. So really it's a win-win situation. You cannot lose. He says that either they will attain the next Ramadan, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bless them with his mercy and forgiveness. So this is the thing that we should all recite together, inshallah. Let's all do this together. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Allahumma la taj'alhu akhir al-ahdi min siyamina iyyah. Fa in ja'altahu faj'alni marhuman wa la taj'alni mahruma. This means, oh Allah, do not make it the last time we fast this month, but if you do decide so if Allah does decide that this would be our last Ramadan, then make me someone who is shown your mercy, and do not make me someone who is deprived of mercy. So let's just recite it one more time. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Allahumma la taj'alhu akhir al-ahdi min siyamina iyyah. Fa in ja'altahu faj'alni marhuma wa la taj'alni mahruma. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And just a word on this day also being Yawmul Quds. This is the day that was really started and designated as Yawmul Quds, the day of Quds, by Imam Khomeini. Now, in 1979, he designated this day, the last Friday of Ramadan, as Yawmul Quds, so that all Muslims could unite in their opposition against Israel because of their occupation of Palestine. So this is why it's named as Yawmul Quds, the day of Quds and Jerusalem. So now, when we look at this is a fantastic opportunity for us to reflect and to ask ourselves how we can help the people of Palestine, but also all oppressed people around the world, wherever they may be, in whichever country they may be in. So let's, inshallah, try to reflect over this. And in particular, one piece of advice I have, that famous dua that we recite after prayers in the holy month of Ramadan, Allahumma adkhil ala ahli quburi surur, right? That dua. Now, my advice to my dear brothers and sisters would be this: on this day of Yawmul Quds, when we are supposed to think about the oppressed people, when we read this, let's concentrate on the meaning. And let's also ask ourselves that, oh Allah, help us to help these people. And let's ask ourselves how we can help these people, the oppressed people from all over the world, to inshallah be in a better position, to attain relief. Because these type of du'as is not just, oh Allah, help them, and like we don't do anything. It's not that. It is we should be asking ourselves, oh Allah, when you say that, when we pray that, oh Allah, enrich every poor person, oh Allah, feed every hungry person, oh Allah, clothe every unclothed person, and so on and so forth, we should be asking ourselves, how can we be the agents of Allah for this to happen? Allah wants to do His work. He wants to help all these people, but He wants to do it through us as agents for His good work. So inshallah, when we recite this dua today, let's reflect over the meanings and ask Him in this way. Let's end with a dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Oh Allah, make this not our last Jumatul Bida, inshallah. Oh Allah, make this not our last Ramadan, inshallah. Oh Allah, if you do make this our last Ramadan, then make us amongst those who are benefiting from your mercy. Do not make us those who are deprived of your mercy. Oh Allah, forgive us and our forefathers for our sins. Or bring relief to all those who are oppressed around the world. Oh Allah, our last but not least prayer is that you hasten the appearance of the 12th Holy Imam. Ajjalallahu ta'ala faraj al-sharif. Wassalamu alaikum.